Hi everybody, so today's lesson is going to be for Monday, April 27th, and you have a bell ringer today, and then we're doing 4 slides, 2 writing slides, 2 picture slides. So don't forget to answer that bell ringer question, and we will go ahead and start recapping the stuff that we talked about the last time. So the last time we had notes, we talked about the massive retaliation, MAD, mutually assured destruction, brinksmanship, which is almost going to the brink of war, basically just like threats and constantly testing and building nuclear weapons, which is a huge threat to other countries when you see that another country might be testing nuclear weapons and they're building up their arsenal of nuclear weapons. That's a huge threat. So you need to keep up with them. Hydrogen bomb, which is 10 times stronger than the atomic bomb, and it is awful. It is terrifying. We've never had to use the hydrogen bomb, but just the fact that we have one is going to scare our enemies for sure, which at this point is the Soviet Union. So we're doing slides 20 to 23, and the first slide that we see is arms race. And there are 2 vocab words on this slide. So we've talked about arms race before when we talked about the first Red Scare leading, and then the first Red Scare, which will eventually lead to the second Red Scare, and it's just going to get more intense. So an arms race is the situation that we're in with the Soviet Union, where we see that they're building up these nuclear missiles, we see that they're building up their stockpiles of weapons, and also just building up their military. Remember, when we talked about World War I and World War II, the main causes for those wars, the M is military. And if you are, drafting people, or you're building up those tanks or any kind of ammunition, guns, weapons, you're training people, you're training soldiers, that is a sign of a threat. Other countries are like, okay, why are they doing that? Why are you building up your military? Is there something that I don't know? What's going on? So an arms race is just building up your arms, building up your weaponry, your arsenals. In this case, it's nuclear weapons, and it's between the Soviets and the United States. So an arms race, the definition is right there: an international contest between countries seeking a military advantage over the other. So when Eisenhower took office, he changed military strategies in the United States. Instead of resisting its enemies with armies and soldiers, the United States would seek to prevent its enemies from attacking in the first place by promising a devastating nuclear response. This meant that we had to keep the lead in the arms race. There's no going around it. We have to keep this lead in the arms race because we cannot have the Soviets more powerful than us at any point. And the last slide with the hydrogen bomb, we have the hydrogen bomb before the Soviets do. So we are ahead for a little bit. So the first American hydrogen bomb was massive. It stood 3 stories tall. 3 stories. It was 1,000,000 pounds. £1,000,000. This is not feasible. You can't use this thing. You can't plop it on a plane and then drop it on another country. I mean, it's too big. It's way too big. So great, you have this technology, but you can't use it. We're going to increase our Air Force because we need to transport these weapons. So with the hydrogen bomb being that big, it's like, okay, well, how do we make it smaller? So it's like, great. Step 1, develop a hydrogen bomb. Can't use it, but how do we make it smaller, which we're going to talk about. But we need to move these weapons across the country or wherever they need to go. We need to store them in places. We also need to be able to transport them to fly over other countries just in case there is a war, and we can drop some nuclear weapons on them. So our Air Force is going to expand, and our arsenal is constantly moving in the air, because if an attack were to happen at any moment, our pilots are just going to go part of the Air Force and attack whoever just attacked us. So we always have an arsenal constantly moving in the air during the Cold War, which is scary because there could be mistakes. We end up multiple times, too many times, close to nuclear war by just small mistakes, or miscommunication. There was actually a plane that crashed, and they were carrying nuclear weapons, and the plane crashed, and thank God, luckily, it didn't explode. For some reason, there was there was some problem with the bomb. It didn't go off. Thank God. Because a plane crashed, or they hit I don't know I don't know if there was a fire or something on the plane, the engines went out, I don't know what it was, but it crashed, and it was carrying nuclear weapons. So that is not even the first instance of this happening. I'm going to talk about on another one on the next slide, right? So we are very lucky that we didn't have a nuclear war by accident, and nobody got really injured by nuclear weapons. So how do we make missiles smaller? How do we transport them to different places? How do we have them, take off from the United States without having to put them in a plane? And how do they just take off and go to the location that we want them to go? They're called ICBMs, and that stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, intercontinent between different continents. So intercontinental ballistic missiles, they are small nuclear weapons that can be carried short distances and deliver a powerful nuclear blow at the same time. 2016 or 2015 is when I think North Korea started to develop their own nuclear weapons. Keep in mind that, most countries have the ability to have nuclear weapons. If they don't, then typically they are behind technologically, like North Korea. They are so behind because it's a dictatorship and Kim Jong-un doesn't work with anybody else and they don't trade or anything like that. They're low on resources. The people are so cut off from the world. They don't have access to information. They are stuck in North Korea. There's no, they don't have this access to information. It's bizarre. So like 2015, 2016, when they started to develop the technology for nuclear weapons, we started to get really worried because we don't want them to do that. And Kim Jong-un is super radical and we don't want him to just like act really quickly and then maybe attack us. So that was pretty scary, but they had just developed ICBMs and we had developed this technology in the 1950s. So that is how you were to if you were to shoot off like a missile and send it to some other country or another continent, you would use an ICBM. You can always drop a missile like with the atomic bombs we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like in a plane, but ICBMs just take off from your land. This picture right here, I think, does a really nice job of explaining the arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States. So 1952, the United States, we have an H-bomb. Well, 1953, the Soviet Union gets an H-bomb. So it's literally just a race to keep up with who's got the best technology and the best weapons. 1954, we have a nuclear-powered submarine. 1957, we test a missile with 2,000 miles. It can go 2,000 miles, which is really far. 1957, the Soviets test a missile. This is the same year. That's 4,000 miles, so they can go farther than our missiles, which is scary. And then we start to lose. So 1957 is a big year for the Soviet Union. They launched SPUTNIK, which was the first satellite that was launched into space. And we, in addition to an arms race, are going to enter a space race with the Soviet Union because, why? First of all, we were born in a time when we all know what space is. We were born when people have already gone to the moon and there are people living in the International Space Station. Somebody has been living in the International Space Station. They constantly send people up and down for 20 years. So we had 2 astronauts just come home from the International Space Station just last week. So this is a big deal for the Soviet Union because we haven't dealt with space before. Space is like a normal thing for us. We're just used to that, but not at this time. So when I say we're putting somebody into space or we're floating an object in space, they're orbiting Earth, that is big because nobody knows what space is. What is it, right? How do we get there? What is it like up there? So 1957, we start a space race with the Soviet Union, and they have a satellite. And then in October, first satellite. November, they send Sputnik 2, and that actually has a dog inside of it. The dog dies. So if you need another reason to dislike the Soviet Union, that's that. And there's a picture of the dog. See? So they put a dog in space to see if it can survive and what it's like up there. As every satellite that they put up into space, they gather information for what it's like. 1958, a year later, we finally launch our satellite into space. And then also 1958, we establish NASA. So we have a whole entity, which we still have NASA today, that deals with space so that we can keep up in this space race with the Soviet Union because we can't look dumb. We have to keep up with them and we cannot lose this race because what if they start to put missiles up in space, nuclear missiles up in space? Their satellite, which is gathering information, what if they're using it to track locations in the United States and then drop some weapons, right? So we don't know what they're doing. doing, and we're panicking, and we need to keep up. Let's see. Here is a picture of some nuclear ICBMs right here. These are the missiles that you just like that they fly off of the land, and you don't have to carry them in an airplane. This is a political cartoon, and we all have nuclear weapons. So it says both sides has nuclear weapons, obviously, but they're using bow and arrows because on the nuclear weapons it says on no account to be used because the enemy might retaliate. So those bow and arrows are mainly like threats and intimidation, right? Like both sides have these awful weapons, but you're just threatening each other with bows and arrows. Okay, next, new technologies. Don't forget a summary for that slide. There are 2 vocab words on this slide. It is Sputnik and satellite. So in 1954, the U.S. Navy launched its first nuclear-powered submarine. Because it was nuclear energy and powered by nuclear energy, it didn't have to stop constantly to refuel, which was really great. And also now we have an arsenal up in the sky of nuclear weapons just flying around, but now we also have them underwater as well. So if we were to encounter like an attack or something like that, we can always use our submarines to counterattack. The nuclear power submarines with nuclear missiles to ensure that the enemy anywhere could be met with devastating nuclear response. We also began to use nuclear power plants in the United States to power homes and businesses. Actually, Ohio is closing down. We voted to, I think last year, to close down our 2 nuclear power plants, because people are kind of scared of them. Sometimes nobody really wants to live next to a nuclear power plant because there would be radiation. I don't know. People are really scared of nuclear energy. There have been power plants that have exploded before, and you don't want to live close to that at all. So people are really hesitant of nuclear energy, which is rightfully so. It's a big thing, but a lot of scientists are like, no, it's actually really safe, but you have to have protections in place, and I don't know. But we're closing ours in Ohio. So the Soviets launched the first ever satellite, Sputnik, and this is big because, we use satellites today, obviously, for like GPSs and just like locating things and gathering information. And we have like rovers on Mars, and we are, trying to explore these planets and learn more about them and things, that's space exploration. That's huge, and that's really important for us. But the fact that the Soviet Union got it first, that's not okay. So we actually have the educational system that we have today because of Sputnik. President Eisenhower at the time was like, this is not good. The fact that they got it first, it makes us look dumb. So he had revamped kind of and pushed for the educational system that we have today, where math and science is like so important. Like you have to, our kids have to be smart in math and smart in science, and they have to do well on testing. We have to make sure that they're brilliant in this stuff because we need mathematicians and we need scientists to keep up with the Soviets in this space race. The testing and the state tests, like the air tests and stuff, that happened with President George W. Bush in 2001. But it started with Sputnik and pushing the United States to become smarter and better in math and science because of Sputnik. So thank you, Soviet Union, for that. These launches of Sputnik 1 and Sputnik 2 caused great concern to the United States. To many Americans, it signaled that the Soviets had surpassed American scientists in terms of skill and knowledge, which would lead to a satellite as a weapon. We responded by creating NASA, which is your one job is to beat the Soviets in this space race and to develop some kind of technology to make us stand out and for us to gain the lead in this race. The first satellite, Sputnik, was the size of a basketball and was 200 pounds. So, there's a lot of math and there's so much science that goes into sending something in space and being able to just like gather information. Like it's insane. It's crazy. I'm fascinated by space, but I'm also terrified by space. That is a scary thing. It's a scary topic to think about. So we are in the middle of an arms race and a space race with the Soviet Union right now, trying to keep up. And trying to not lose or be unprepared for potential attacks. It's scary. It's really scary. Make sure you write your vocab words down. Make sure you have summaries. And don't forget to answer the bell rung question. All right. Bye, guys.